And we have another questioner here. If there's anybody else that wants to change places with James or Cam there, I'll call on our other questioner. Please put your question, sir.
Hi, my name is Ali. I'm from Orchard Asset Management. I have a question regarding, I have two questions. Mr. Rossi, you mentioned a lot of private-public partnerships. My question is, what happens when a private-public partnership does not work the way it's meant to work? And I can give an example like the 407, which was built on public money, but then it was sold to a private dealership on an ironclad contract. And at that point, even the government could not make a change on it. And it's in place for another 95 or 94 years. And my second question is about, you also mentioned financial advisors. The millions of Ontarians follow and rely on financial advisors for their retirement planning and savings. One of the key concerns I have is the trailer fees that financial advisors take for their compensation, which poses a conflict of interest because there's different funds that have different trailer fees. And sometimes there's many stories of financial advisors not giving the best product to their clients as a result of it. So how would you address this concern?
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. And it'll be Mr. Prue, Minister Pupatello, and Mr. Rossi. Mr. Prue.
Thank you very much. In public-private partnerships, first of all, New Democrats don't generally agree with them because we find that it will raise the costs. For the simple reason is that governments can borrow money almost always at a cheaper cost than private institutions can raise the money. So in terms of long-term debt and servicing that debt, it works out cheaper if government is to do it in the majority of cases, and hence our reluctance to go down that road. But secondly, the 407, what a travesty. What a total travesty. When the government sold that off in order to balance the books going into an election, and that's all it was. It was sold for a pittance, and people today are, I would say people who drive that are often being gouged, and we've heard all kinds of horror stories and their license being taken away and the threatening phone calls and everything else. And they really have no comeback. We don't think selling public assets is a good thing. We think that public assets need to work for all people, and that includes things like the LCBO, which brings in tons of money to us every year. We're not going to go down the road of privatizing those. In terms of trailer fees, it's a pretty simple response. All you have to do is make the trailer fee for all the products the same, and so that people know, and so that there's no financial incentive to person to sell the one that gives him or her the best trailer fee. If it's the same amount, then they will generally be giving the same advice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prue. Minister Pupatello.
Thanks. I appreciate your commentary on the 407. Unfortunately, we didn't sell it enough. They couldn't actually balance the budget. And when we began as government in 2003, we had a $6 billion deficit in that year. So everyone said many comments about the 407 and that deal. That doesn't happen today, and it hasn't happened since the institution of Infrastructure Ontario. We've brought experts in to work for the government. We now have clauses in governmental contracts that include on time, on budget, and heavy fines when they don't meet that, just as exists in the private sector on builds. So we've had a tremendous success rate. There are hundreds of projects out there on the go, and they're working. The fact that we can actually do them when governments, frankly, can't finance all of these, but we need them, speaks to the cleverness of using an IO-type institution to do it. I think time will tell its success, but so far it's like a beacon out there in the modern economies that are using and want info about our model because it's working. On the whole notion of asset and government asset, I think times change. I think you should always have a government who's prepared to look at the question and suggest that some things that government ran and owned in the past perhaps isn't as appropriate today, but there are other things that we should control that perhaps we didn't before. And no government should be opposed to wanting to have a good look at something, as we've been doing. And it's not just a matter of the money, it's strategically placing where your public service is going to do their work. If you name an asset, you get everybody up in arms. But in fairness, you should really have a good look. Government should never be afraid of change. And frankly,
Minister?
That's the one thing that government's been doing in the last 8 years in Ontario.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rossi.
Thank you, Ali, for the question. The reality is, for every example of a 3P that you can point to that didn't work out the way you wanted to, I could point to a dozen government only run programs that have been disasters, and one need look no further than eHealth. I mean, there is no abundance of angels on the other side of that question as well. So I would just ask that people have to negotiate better. There has to be strong conditions put in, and you learn. But to discount it would be disastrous, because, quite frankly, this government has spent us into a very major hole, has left us with very little financial wiggle room. They keep bringing up this notion of a $6 billion deficit. Well, guess what? There's a $14 billion deficit this year, and it's going up by their own projections to $16 billion next year, which is not much of a deficit reduction plan. So we're going to have to look at creative solutions to leverage money that government can bring to the table, but that also the private sector can bring to the table. And also in 3Ps, it's not simply a matter of money, it's also management of the project. Sometimes it is the case that governments can borrow more cheaply, but you still may want the project managed by experts in the field.
Thank you very much. Okay, Phil, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I appreciated the earlier question about flow-through share financing. In the spring election, the federal Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP each expressed support for flow-through share financing, and the Conservatives and NDP specifically said that they supported the mineral exploration tax credit. On Saturday, we heard the national chief say that we are on lands traditionally used by the Mississaugas of the new credit. This morning, we've heard that Toronto is a finance capital. We're not the world's finance capital, but we are the world's mining finance capital. Northern Ontario is the leading jurisdiction in Canada for mineral exploration investment. It's also home to several dozen First Nations communities. If you form government October 6, what will you do to ensure that First Nations in Ontario are able to benefit from mineral exploration and mining investment?
Thank you very much, Phil. And the order on this one will be Mr. Rossi, Mr. Prue, and Minister Pupatello.
It's an excellent question, and we could have asked for it to be written ourselves. If you look at Change Book North, the Progressive Conservative Party is very clear. We want to ensure that local communities, both municipalities and the First Nations, receive shares of any revenues generated through mining and other economic activities in the north. So this is a clear principle, clearly enunciated in our platform, that has to be fundamental, because this is an issue, clearly a very sensitive issue, that has dogged the country for its entire history, and only when all partners are treated as full partners are we going to move towards the reconciliation required to both ensure that unemployment issues and economic issues in local communities are met, but also so that the greater economy is going to benefit, and not to shut down Northern Ontario for business.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prue.
Thank you very much for the question. Ontario has a unique responsibility in that we are signatories to Treaty 9, which is the largest area in Northern Ontario, and in fact where the Ring of Fire is located. We signed that and promised consultation and collaboration with Native communities. So it's not just the federal government in the Treaty 9 area, it is us as well. And we have not done, in my view, a very good job of collaborating and cooperating and helping the resource and the development of Northern Ontario, particularly in the traditional lands. But we have a shining beacon. We have De Beers in Attawapiskat, who has done all of the right things. Before going in there, they consulted with the Native community. They made plans with them. They agreed to hire them. And the majority of people working in Attawapiskat in that mine are people from the community. And they have given them training and jobs and hope for the first time in their lives. And that's what we should be doing. It is on their traditional lands. It is part of the treaty, and we have an obligation to lift them out of the abysmal poverty in which they live, and to give them hope for the future so that they can stay where they live with their families, develop it, have good jobs, and some pride in being an Ontarian and a Canadian.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Thanks. I was glad that Michael mentioned that, because Attawapiskat and, in fact, De Beers worked with the Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs in order to secure all of that, including some level of refining here in Ontario with the diamonds that come out of the mine. We've really made landmark movement in the area of how we work with Aboriginal people, and I think we'll continue to do that. We've done that on the green energy file, not just on mining. It's been across the government in innumerable examples of how we've taken it to that next step. It's not perfect, it's not easy, and it's not fast. It's tough work, but I think we have a very good track record of doing it. I marvel that this environment doesn't allow me to interject when others are speaking here, because, Mr. Rossi, you just don't know the history of the party that you just joined on Aboriginal engagement. I mean, God, they did movies about your government and Aboriginals.
Well, and there's a nice one
it's
about
appalling.
Caledonia,
It's
too, so
appalling to have to sit
don't
and
talk
listen.
to me about angelic.
In any event, the truth is the truth. That we've got to talk about our record. What did the Conservatives do when they were in office? They had the Ipperwash fiasco. What the NDP did, in fairness to the NDP, they did a lot, quite frankly, to engage in consultation. We've taken it a step further. The Ring of Fire, the largest chromium find, probably in our generation, in the far, far north, is going to be another beacon example of how we engage with Aboriginal people. And it will be much like we've done these last 8 years, and I appreciate the question.